Indonesia is a country that is both extremely important to the world and yet is very unknown to the wider world, and especially unknown to America. Indonesia is the fourth most populous country on Earth and has the 10th largest economy purchasing power parity. Indonesia harvests and exports extremely important resources such as palm oil, coal, petroleum, and metals. In spite of this importance on the world stage, many people in the Western world know extremely little about Indonesia and even less about its history. I want to give some basic knowledge on Indonesia. Indonesia is a country located on many islands in Southeast Asia and is surrounded by the countries of Malaysia, the Philippines, Brunei, East Timor, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. In this video, I will mention many different islands and regions of Indonesia. The mainland, or Kra Isthmus, is the land that juts out from the mainland Asia right next to Indonesia. Sumatra is a long diagonal island to the west. Java is a small rectangle island in the center south. Kalimantan is a blob-shaped island north of Java. Sulawesi is the island with all the arms east of Kalimantan. Nusa Tenggara is the name for all of these small islands between Celebes, Java, and New Guinea. Specific islands inside of this chain include the Moluccas, or Spice Islands, to the east of Celebes, Bali, right to the east of Java, and Timor to the southeast of Java. New Guinea is a large island on the easternmost part of this archipelago. Finally, the Philippines is a group of islands to the northeast. I will refer to this entire group of islands as Nusantara or the Nusantaran archipelago in this video. The history of Indonesia is very long and is often told from the viewpoint of outside powers. Firstly, both Chinese and Indian influences came to Indonesia since before the year zero. These influences came primarily through traders, especially through the spice trade. The spice trade has always been an integral part of Indonesia. The economy of Indonesia has been based on the spice trade until recent years, and even today, many spices, such as mace and clove, are grown primarily in Indonesia. Traders who passed through Indonesia were almost always trading Indonesian spices towards China or towards the Middle East and Europe. Empires based out of Indonesia acquired their wealth through the spice trade and based their power on the spice trade. The first major change in Indonesian society came from Indian spice traders who spread Hinduism to Indonesia in the 1st century AD. Hinduism would be the majority religion of Indonesia until Islam was introduced in the 13th century and became the majority by the 16th century. Today, Indonesia has the most Muslims of any country on earth. After the introduction of Hinduism, many small kingdoms would control Indonesia until the 7th century, where the Srivijaya Empire would rise. The Srivijaya Empire would peak around the turn of the millennium, controlling all of Sumatra, along with parts of Java, Kalimantan, and much of the Kra Isthmus. The Srivijaya would eventually fall during the 13th century and would be replaced by the Dharmasira and the Singhasari. The Singhasari were eventually overthrown by the Majapahit. During the late 1300s, the Mongol Empire took over much of the Eurasian continent and sent troops to the Singhasari Empire to subjugate them. In this effort, the Mongol troops worked together with a noble of the Majapahit family and overthrew the Singhasari Empire. The Majapahit troops then betrayed the Mongols and began to expand throughout the Nusantaran archipelago. We will come back to these Majapahit after explaining the rest of Indonesian history. The fall of the Majapahit was closely related to the spread of Islam, as much of the Majapahit's importance was derived from Hinduism. This led to the end of the Majapahit in the 1500s, where many Islamic sultanates rose up. Sultanates such as the Aceh, Banjar, Ternate, and Tidore sultanates. These sultanates controlled much of the Nusantara archipelago and the spice trade until the Europeans arrived. The Portuguese eventually were the first to arrive, conquering the Moluccas, or what the Europeans called the Spice Islands. Eventually, the Dutch overtook the Portuguese and took advantage of native sultanates' control over the spice trade. During this time, the Spanish took the Philippines. The takeover of the Nusantara archipelago by the Europeans occurred from the 1500s to the 1900s, and by 1930, the archipelago was fully colonized by the Europeans. During World War II, the Japanese Empire invaded the European colonies to gain vital resources such as oil, and killed many during their occupation. After World War II, the Dutch were too weakened, and Indonesia was able to gain its independence. It would then go through many power shifts and become the nation it is today. In today's scenario, I want to go back to the Majapahit Empire, which was the most powerful native Indonesian empire in history, with a massive navy and complete control over the spice trade. I want to explore a scenario where the Majapahit were still powerful when the Europeans arrived and allowed Indonesia to be a more powerful and influential nation on the world stage in the modern day. As I talked about earlier, the Majapahit originated from allying with and then betraying the Mongols. The Majapahit quickly took over much of the previous Singasari's empire. By 1370, the Majapahit had become the largest and most powerful Indonesian empire in history. They controlled Sumatra, most of Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and the Moluccas. They also controlled much of the Kra Isthmus and a small part of New Guinea. The bright purple shows the center of the empire, where its control was the greatest, and the dark purple shows the Majapahit vassal states, which are where the Majapahit influence was less strong but still noticeable. The Majapahit were known as what is called a Thessalocracy. This is a nation that is built around a navy controlling many islands. They controlled one of the largest navies in the world and had control over the spice trade. The Majapahit continued to expand until the Europeans arrived, and they expanded to many islands in the Nusantara archipelago and consolidated the center of their empire on Sumatra, Java, and Kalimantan. During this time period, the Majapahit rulers began to centralize Indonesian Hinduism into a more united religion than Hinduism tends to be. Right as the Europeans began to arrive, the Majapahit reached the height of their power. At this time, the centralized regions of the empire included Malaysia, Sumatra, Java, Sulawesi, most of Kalimantan, and many eastern islands. Their vassal states included territories in the Kra Isthmus, Borneo, New Guinea, much of the Philippines, and even Australia. In real life, when the Europeans arrived, they found many small, but still powerful Indonesian sultanates fighting amongst each other. These fights made it extremely easy for the Europeans to take advantage and capture territory along with the spice trade. In this scenario, the Europeans are instead finding a massive empire with a large navy, military, and economy. But even with this power, the Indonesians are still technologically behind the Europeans, and many edge regions of the Majapahit Empire want to break free for religious or other reasons. So even in this timeline, the Europeans are able to exploit cracks in the empire to gain control over much of the spice trade and the Nusantara archipelago. By 1800, the Dutch controlled the Moluccan Islands and had much influence over the Kendari and Sarangs Rajanates. The Portuguese control Timor, and the Spanish control the Philippines. The Spanish also have influence over the Sulu Rajanate in North Kalimantan. Along with the Europeans, the Aceh Sultanate declared independence, and the Ayutthaya have expanded into the Kra Isthmus. At the beginning of the 1800s, the Napoleonic Wars overtook Europe and took their eyes off their colonies. During these wars, the Dutch were invaded and conquered by the French, and the Majapahit retook all of Sulawesi during this period of weakness. Also during this time period, the Majapahit moved closer to the British to avoid further colonialism from the Spanish and Dutch. In exchange for British diplomatic support, the Majapahit turned more into the British economic sphere. During the rest of the 1800s, the Majapahit grew closer to the British, and with this alliance, they become somewhat of an Ottoman empire of Southeast Asia. The Majapahit have stayed alive, but only because of British support, and they have become fully reliant on Britain economically. During World War I, the Majapahit allowed the British to send troops through their territory to fight against German New Guinea. For this effort, part of New Guinea was given to the Majapahit, and even the small Dutch territory on New Guinea was gifted to the Majapahit. During the interwar period, the Majapahit also grew close to the Americans, as the Americans control the Philippines, and Indonesia has many resources the Americans need. Of course, during this period, the Japanese begin to expand into China, and the Americans embargo them, cutting off their oil supply, making the Japanese invasion of China almost impossible. In response to this, the Japanese begin to turn their ambitions south towards the Majapahit for their oil and iron supplies. When Germany begins to conquer the European powers of the Netherlands and France, the Japanese begin to expand into their European colonies, and eventually, after Pearl Harbor, they invade the Philippines as well. At their greatest extent, the Japanese control much of Southeast Asia, but they were never fully able to conquer the Majapahit. The Majapahit fight extremely hard during World War II, especially because of the horrors of Japanese occupation, and they never officially surrendered, with pockets of resistance on Sumatra, Java, and New Guinea holding out through the entire war. For their resilience, and because of European neglect, the Majapahit are rewarded many European colonies during decolonization. The American Philippines, British New Guinea, and Portuguese Timor are all folded into the Majapahit nation by 1950, as the Europeans and Americans realized the colonies are no longer worth the trouble. They are also extensively rebuilt during the U.S. Marshall Plan, similarly to Japan and much of Western Europe. This helps improve their economy. In 1952, the Majapahit Empire rebrands itself as the Nusantara Republic, and the Majapahit monarchy becomes mostly a figurehead. During the Cold War, the Nusantarans are the US's largest ally in Asia and are especially strategically important to counter the Chinese influence. Eventually, the Soviets collapse in the 90s, and the Americans become by far the most powerful nation on Earth until the 2020s. During the 20s, many American allies begin to grow apart as the couple American leaders focus on internal issues over their geopolitical ambitions. By 2030, the world is divided into four major zones of influence. The Americans still hold a large amount of economic influence over the Americas, the Middle East, and much of Africa. The European Union has grown apart from the US economically, but still have many connections to the Americas. In the 20th century, the European Union expanded into parts of the Middle East and North Africa, becoming a great power themselves and humbling the Russians in the Ukraine war. As the American influence began to wane, their main political and economic rival of China expanded their influence to the defeated Russia, Central Asia, and much of Africa. And recently, a new power bloc has emerged as India and Nusantara both try to escape American and Chinese political and economic influence. These two nations, along with much of Southeast Asia and Australia, formed a new economic bloc bridging the gap between the Chinese and Americans. This new world order is multipolar, and Nusantara can be considered a great power. In the modern day, the Nusantaran Republic is one of the largest and most influential nations on the world stage. They have the third largest population at 521.4 million, coming only after India and China, and ahead of the Americans. They are the seventh largest nation area-wise, with 3.5 million kilometers squared, just behind Australia. They also have the third largest economy, with 9.54 trillion, coming in a large amount behind America and a little bit ahead of Germany. The Nusantaran Republic is divided into 8 main regions, which are further divided into 36 provinces. Sumatra in green is comprised of 6 provinces, totaling 61.2 million people. Sumatra has one of the largest Islamic influence of any region and was the center of the Srivijaya Empire. It has large oil reserves and is along the Strait of Malacca, possibly the most important area that Nusantara controls. Malaysia, in blue, is comprised of 5 provinces, totaling 48 million. Malaysia is the only region on mainland Asia and was the ancestral homeland of the Malay people. Malaysia has the other side of the Strait of Malacca and the important port of Singapore. Java, in purple, is comprised of 6 provinces, totaling 174 million. Java was the center of the Majapahit Empire and is the center of Nusantara today, with a third of the population, along with the capital and the largest city. Java has a large amount of the Nusantaran economy and is the most populated island on Earth. Kalimantan, in orange, is comprised of 4 provinces, totaling 29.9 million. Kalimantan is an island mostly covered in forest and is very sparsely populated, with the interior regions being mostly unconnected to the rest of the nation. Sulawesi, in aqua, is comprised of 3 provinces, totaling 22.6 million. Sulawesi was important for many Indonesian empires as their access point to the spice trade, and is known for its interesting shape with many peninsulas separating its many distinctive peoples. Nusa Tenggara is comprised of 4 provinces, totaling 18 million. Nusa Tenggara is composed of hundreds of islands spread out between Java, Sulawesi, and New Guinea. In Nusa Tenggara are the famous Moluccas, or Spice Islands, where the spice trade and Majapahit wealth originated. New Guinea is composed of 3 provinces and is in pink. These provinces total 31.9 million. New Guinea is very similar to Borneo with its rainforests, but it is even less dense. New Guinea has the highest concentration of languages of any area on Earth because of its geography separating its peoples into small groups numbering in the low thousands, each speaking their own language. Finally, the Philippines is comprised of 5 provinces, totaling 135.8 million. The Philippines were colonized by both the Spanish and later the Americans, but they are still Austronesian peoples similar to the rest of Nusantara. The Philippines is highly populated and is the center for Christianity in Nusantara. Nusantara has 30 metro areas with a population over a million. The 3 most important metro areas in Nusantara are Jayakarta, Manila, and Majapahit. Jayakarta has a population of 37.4 million and is one of the largest metro areas in the world. Jayakarta is situated in Java and is the largest economic center for the country. Jayakarta is where many Nusantarans go to become something. Manila has a population of 25.1 million and is one of the most dense cities in the world. Manila is on the island of Luzon in the Philippines and is also an extremely important economic center and an important connector to China and American trade. Majapahit has a population of 9.1 million and is the capital of Nusantara. Majapahit was, of course, the capital of the Majapahit Empire, but it was called Trowulan back then. It is the most important city culturally in the nation. The third largest city in Nusantara is Surabaya, another city on Java with a population of 9.5 million. Surabaya is the center of the Madura culture and has always been an important city for the Majapahit. Rounding out the top 10 is Bandung in West Java with a population of 8.4 million, Kuala Lumpur on mainland Asia with a population of 7.1 million, the important port of Singapore with a population of 6.7 million, Medan on Sumatra with a population of 5.8 million, Semarang, another Javan city with a population of 5.7 million, and Cebu, the largest city in the South Philippines with a population of 3.2 million. Nusantara has many different ethnic and linguistic groups. Almost all of these peoples and languages are Austronesian, with the exception of the Papuan peoples and languages on New Guinea. To unite all of these peoples, Nusantara is used as a lingua franca. Nusantara is a standardized version of Malay with influences from Javanese, English, and Spanish. Besides Nusantara, there are 16 languages with over 3 million speakers. Malay in purple on the mainland, along with parts of Sumatra and Kalimantan. Achanese in brown on the tip of Sumatra. Batak in red in the center of Sumatra. Mingang Baku in dark green on the west coast of Sumatra. Javanese in dark blue on Java and the south tip of Sumatra. Sundanese in hot pink on the west of Java. Madura in orange in East Java. Balinese in pink on the island of Bali. Banjarese in light blue on South Kalimantan. Buganese in brown on Sulawesi. Hiligaynon in brown and Cebuano in bright green in the South Philippines. Bicol in dark red and Waray in bright red in the East Philippines. And Tagalog in yellow and Ilocano in aqua in the North Philippines. Along with being linguistically diverse, Nusantara is also religiously diverse. The majority of Nusantara is Hindu, with Hinduism originally being introduced by Indian spice traders in the 1st century. Many Srivijayan and Majapahit leaders derive their power as being god kings in Hinduism. Hinduism is the majority on all of Java and Kalimantan, most of the mainland and Sumatra, and parts of Sulawesi and the Philippines. After Hinduism, the next largest religion is Catholicism, which was introduced by the Spanish and Portuguese from the 1500s on. Catholicism is the majority in Timor and most of the Philippines. After Catholicism, Islam and Protestantism have similar populations. Protestantism was also introduced by Europeans, primarily the Dutch and English. Protestantism is the majority of most of New Guinea and the Moluccas. Islam was introduced by Islamic traders during mainly the 13 and 1400s. Islam is the majority on the north and west of Sumatra, along with parts of Sulawesi. Finally, Buddhism is the majority on the border with Thailand and some of the Riau Islands. In this world, Nusantara is one of the great powers of the world, uniting many different peoples into one nation. The world can't forget Indonesia like ours does. Thanks for watching.